Animal Crossing: New Horizons, the multiple award-winning, pure comforting copium which many of us relied on to survive the chaos which has been the last few years. And The Sims 4, which, as far as I can tell, has only won the award for being one of the industry's most extortionate games. But what can I say, I've been playing it for the last 8 years, so it must occupy a soft spot in my cynical heart. While looking and feeling pretty different at a surface level, Animal Crossing: New Horizons and The Sims 4 do share some similarities, both in the history and progression of their respective franchises and in gameplay. And generally, I think it's fair to say that a fan of one game would find enjoyment in the other. So, my beautiful viewers, I invite you to join me today in exploring a few of these similarities that I've noticed between two of my favourite games. So, blowing it out for a moment, for a little bit of context, both the Sims and Animal Crossing series were born right around the turn of the millennium, during a time when companies were rapidly innovating and bringing out many new IPs which would come to define their brands. Both franchises would quickly come to be beloved by dedicated fan bases who appreciated the high degrees of freedom and creativity which each of the games allowed players to explore, while also giving them something lighthearted and comforting to chill out with. But bringing us back to the present day, I think the best place to start actually comparing Animal Crossing: New Horizons and The Sims 4 naturally is with the gameplay. And, well, for both games, actual gameplay doesn't particularly feel like the priority. Let me explain. I think most long-term fans of the Sims series will agree that The Sims 4's Create a Sim and Build mode are the best that the series has seen, and I think many would also agree that the general gameplay of The Sims 4 is the weakest that the series has seen because it lacks a lot of the depth, spontaneity, and quirkiness which we have become accustomed to in previous iterations of the game. That's not to say that The Sims 4 isn't fun, it's just different. But I'd say that the main goal with The Sims 4, or any Sims game I guess, is to make enough money to build a nice house, to build up some relationships with those around you, and well, then you die. But before that, in my experience, your household reaches a point where you have as much money as you could need and nothing to spend it on because you already have everything you want in your massive, beautiful mansion already. Most of the game's challenge is weighted towards the start of a new household when you're slowly trying to build up your skills and wealth before it snowballs into a pretty quick accumulation of capital. And I guess sans the whole dying aspect, Animal Crossing games share the same basic formula. Explaining the general gameplay in Animal Crossing games to someone who isn't familiar with them is kind of difficult. You catch bugs and fish to sell them to pay off your bills, you plant flowers and you talk to people in your town, then you get a nice big house and you decorate it however you want and you live happily ever after. Well, ACNH kind of threw a spanner in this basic formula. Now we can decorate almost the entire world. Hate where a building is? Easy, pick it up and move it. Want to bend the rivers, lakes and mountains to your will? Yeah, just buy this magic shovel. Literally want to change the inside of not just your own home, but your neighbours, breaking almost every interpersonal boundary? Buy the DLC and you can do it. At a surface level, ACNH did make attempts to build on the basic gameplay system by introducing aspects like material gathering and crafting and the Nook Mile achievement system. I like both of these features a lot, but importantly, I believe they are most effective and impactful during the early stages of the game. By the late game, you've gathered enough resources to decorate any area however you want, and you've likely completed all of the low to mid tier Nook Mile achievements, and all the remaining ones are so arbitrarily massive that it feels very overwhelming and perhaps even impossible, or at least very disheartening to try to complete. So what are you left with in the late game? Designing. And I'll note here that these distinct game focuses are reflected in each of the game's DLC. Happy Home Paradise for New Horizons exclusively focused on the interior and exterior aspects of designing, and I think that we can see The Sims 4's focus on this in the vast number of kits which we've had recently, which solely contain either Create a Sim or Build by assets. They tried making one gameplay-centered kit in March of last year with the Bust the Dust kit, but this failed so miserably that they haven't attempted to make another one since. So this focus on aesthetics rather than gameplay, and more specifically progress and achievement, in my opinion, means that we are much less attached to every new save file or household, and this therefore plays into why it's so common for players to start new islands or families, only to then abandon them not longer after starting, and starting all over again. In both games, the bulk of the challenge and gameplay is packed at the start of the game, game, then tapers out to a point where there are minimal new objectives which the game imposes on you. Instead, you put your own goals in place, but what options do you really have for those goals? They are mostly limited and boil down to the question, how do you want your world to look? I believe another part to why players choose to reset their islands or boot up a new save file also extends to the others which make up the worlds around you in Animal Crossing New Horizons and The Sims 4. In earlier Animal Crossing games, you had more or less no choice over which villagers would come to live in your town, and you had a lot less choice over when they would move out too. While in New Horizons, we had the ability to go on near endless villager hunts and to literally pave the villages we want in our town through sites like Nookazon. I'll talk a little bit more in a minute about the personality or lack thereof of villagers in New Horizons, but these features which the devs implemented into the game, or which us as players have learnt to exploit, have essentially rendered villagers into items. Items which move, look cute or effing ugly in some cases, and occasionally interact with the world around them. All normal types share the same dialogue, as do all snooty, lazy, peppy types, you get what I mean. All that differentiates them is their aesthetics, and I don't know about you guys, but I just haven't formed that same sense of attachment to many of my villagers in New Horizons because of how much more obvious this has become in Animal Crossing's latest iteration. Similarly, in The Sims 4, wow, it feels like Sims hardly have any personality to them. This perhaps doesn't apply as much to those in your current household because you obviously have more of that aspect of directly playing with households and creating imagination and stories around them yourselves, but it definitely applies a lot more to those you come across wandering around the world, including other pre-made households. This may be due to the smaller number of traits to choose from compared to The Sims 3, for example, or the fact that you now only have 3 trait slots, or maybe how there are very few unique and fun reward traits which were available to purchase, or maybe because all of the returning pre-made households have been blitzed of any and all storylines and lore which had been established in previous games, or maybe I just lack imagination, but I don't know. Like the villagers in Animal Crossing New Horizons, townies in The Sims 4 just feel bland and extremely unmemorable. Beyond that, the villagers from previous Animal Crossing games were a lot more sassy. They could be absolute savages. On multiple occasions by this point, I've referred to The Sims 4 as a happiness simulator, and I think I could also apply this moniker to Animal Crossing New Horizons, but I'll note here that it wouldn't have quite the same essence of scathing behind it. Compared to The Sims 4, of course, Animal Crossing in general has a much more laid-back vibe to it than The Sims, but the old games definitely still had that element of spice, which could be found in aspects like villager interactions, or even when you'd come across Rossetti when you'd forget to save your game. You know, thinking about it now, my theory relating to the sanitization of the Sims series, which I spoke about in this video pinned above, could very likely extend to Animal Crossing New Horizons, but I don't know. If by any chance you caught that video, let me know what you think about it down below. I think it's really interesting to put these games and their respective franchises side by side and to see how they have seemingly followed very similar trajectories. It would certainly be interesting to see how the life simulator genre looks in a few years. I won't lie, it seems, at least for The Sims, that this focus on aesthetics in particular seem to be central to what we've seen so far of The Sims 5, which at the moment is being referred to as Project Renee. Perhaps I'm already getting ahead of myself, but given that literally all of what we've seen of the very early footage from Project Renee has been focused on build mode, I'm not particularly hopeful that the devs are sinking their time into creating deep, rich, fulfilling gameplay, but I desperately hope I'm proved wrong. But again, coming back to the present, a little while back I read this comment which has really stuck with me. I'll throw it up on the screen here, but in essence it points out the importance of being aware of when we enter a game series and how this will impact our experiences with future titles. The commenter notes how they have had a similar experience with the Elder Scrolls series to what I've had with the Sims franchise, and also now the Animal Crossing series. In contrast to the commenter, my first Elder Scrolls game was Skyrim. I loved it, I still loved it. I tried playing some of Oblivion and I couldn't get into it as much because because I was so accustomed to Skyrim. In contrast, my first experience with The Sims and Animal Crossing were The Sims 3 and Wild World respectively. As such, I've had massive hopes and expectations for The Sims 4 and Animal Crossing New Horizons, and they've both lived up to and fulfilled those, and also not. Perhaps if New Horizons and The Sims 4 were my first flirts with each series, I wouldn't be making this video today. So to end this, why have I more or less stopped playing Animal Crossing New Horizons, yet 8 years later I still more or less regularly play The Sims 4? Maybe it's a simple question. The Sims 4 is still regularly being updated with new content, and DLC is regularly being released. While following the long-awaited 2.0 update and release of the Happy Home Paradise DLC, Animal Crossing New Horizons has largely been abandoned, despite the fact that the game recently surpassed 40 million total sales, which equates to around a third of all Nintendo Switch owners. Perhaps I somewhat killed Animal Crossing New Horizons for myself by creating a YouTube channel around it, which undeniably caused my burnout on the game. Maybe it's that ever so slight fear that going back to my island after all this time will not be a very pleasant experience, as I know that my island is incomplete and an overwhelming mess. But I also have this competing aversion to deleting my island and starting again due to my attachment to it. While with The Sims 4, I know I can just boot up a new save file and still be able to visit my old Sims if I choose. Or maybe Animal Crossing New Horizons served a purpose for me and many others during a time of great uncertainty, and now it's simply fulfilled that purpose. Maybe it's a combination of all these aspects, or perhaps it's something else entirely. Wow, I feel like I'm getting a little bit too deep and rhetorical by this point, so I think this is where I should end the video. If you have any experiences with either of these games or their respective wider series, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what I've suggested today, or generally whatever you're feeling about these games at the moment. If you enjoyed this video, I definitely think you'll like the one that I've thrown up on the screen right now. It's all about considering the extent to which The Sims 4 could be viewed as a reboot of the Sims series, looking into the sanitization of the game's lore and all that good stuff. But that's all I've got for you guys today. If you have any other thoughts, questions, or suggestions, please feel free to drop them down below because I would love to hear from you. I hope you're having a great day, and I'll see you again soon.